Have you ever thought about how we actually learn the building blocks of language?
Oh, I mean, all the time. It's fascinating.
Right. And I don't mean just, staring at a chalkboard or trying to basically brute force a massive list of vocabulary words into your short-term memory until your eyes just completely glaze over.
Yeah, which never works anyway.
Exactly. I mean, the actual mechanical, psychological process of taking a completely alien sound, attaching a fluid concept to it, and this is the key part, wrapping it in enough context and humor that it actually takes root in your brain forever.
Right, because it really is one of the most profound cognitive hurdles a human being can face. Think about the reality of being an adult learner,
Yeah.
right? Just an absolute beginner in a new language.
It's terrifying.
It's so vulnerable. You possess this incredibly complex, nuanced cognitive capacity as a fully grown adult. You understand irony, you understand subtle emotional shifts, the gray areas of human behavior.
Yeah, you have a whole lifetime of experiences.
Right. But your expressive capability in this new language is basically reduced to that of a toddler.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's a rough transition.
It is. You are trapped in this deeply frustrating space. So the pedagogical challenge is just immense. Like, how do you bridge that gap between an adult's sophisticated mind and a beginner's super limited vocabulary without just, completely overwhelming their working memory?
Well, that tension, that exact vulnerability you're talking about, is actually the engine behind today's deep dive.
I am so ready for this.
We are looking at what I can only describe as a masterclass in how to solve that specific problem. We managed to get our hands on an official instructional document designed for what is known as Level A1.
So the absolute ground floor beginners.
Exactly. It's titled English Guide Frequency Adverbs, Lesson 65.
And the stated parameters of this document are just so fascinating to me. It explicitly mandates that the instructor has to deliver this material at an extra slow speed and that it features expanded content. When you see parameters like extra slow speed and expanded content for A1 learners, it signals a very specific instructional philosophy.
What do you mean by that?
Well, it means the educator recognizes that speed and volume are the enemies of retention. They are intentionally slowing the pacing way down to allow the learner's brain to actually process the structural mechanics of the language.
So they aren't just panicking and trying to translate on the fly.
Exactly. It removes the panic.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because we are going to dive into how this single lesson plan takes three incredibly common little words.
Yeah.
Always, sometimes, and never, and uses mathematical precision, a really rigid structural law, and honestly, a surprisingly dramatic fictional narrative to just burn them into a student's memory.
I love that.
Yeah, what seems on its face like a super dry clinical grammar exercise actually hides this hilarious, highly relatable story about human deception, secret junk food stashes, and the elaborate lies we tell ourselves.
It really is a brilliant piece of instructional design. Because, to successfully teach a complex linguistic rule to a beginner, you just cannot start with abstract theory.
Right, you lose them instantly.
Yeah, you have to start by building a completely stable, unquestionable foundation. You have to totally eliminate the gray areas first.
So let's dive right into how they build that foundation in this guide. The lesson begins by mapping these three frequency adverbs to cold, hard mathematics.
Nice and concrete.
Extremely concrete. It establishes a vocabulary baseline that leaves absolutely no room for interpretation. It dictates that always equals exactly 100%.
Okay.
Sometimes equals exactly 50%. And never equals exactly 0%.
Wow, they really lock it down.
They do. And then it pairs these percentages with three very specific target actions, which are clean the room, eat junk food, and exercise.
Now consider the deliberate choice of those three actions. Cleaning, eating junk food, and exercising.
They're pretty universal.
They are, but they are not neutral verbs. They are highly charged, heavily judged human activities. They're the exact behaviors that we constantly monitor, feel guilty about, and frankly lie about. By choosing those specific actions, the lesson immediately signals to the adult learner that, hey, this isn't just about boring vocabulary. This is about real-world human behavior.
See, I love the behavioral psychology angle there, but I actually have to challenge this mathematical framework a little bit.
Go for it.
If we're talking about real human behavior, is it actually accurate or even useful to tell a student that sometimes means exactly 50%?
I mean, statistically, no.
Right. Human habits defy that kind of precision. If I tell you, I sometimes go for a run, I'm definitely not running on exactly 182.5 days of the year.
Yeah, I'd be very impressed if you were.
Right. Sometimes might mean once a month when the weather is nice, or it might mean 3 times a week when I'm feeling super motivated. It's an entirely subjective, fluid concept.
Yeah.
So why teach a rigid mathematical falsehood to a beginner?
What's fascinating here is that you've just hit on the core paradox of early language acquisition. From a strictly linguistic standpoint, you are entirely correct. Sometimes is fluid, it's contextual, it's deeply subjective.
Right. It depends on a million factors.
But from a pedagogical standpoint, ambiguity is the ultimate enemy of the beginner. If you introduce nuance too early, you trigger cognitive paralysis.
Because their brain is already just working in overdrive trying to process the sound.
Exactly
There.
that. The cognitive load of learning a new language is staggering. The student is desperately trying to decode unfamiliar phonetics, parse strange syntax, retrieve new vocabulary, all at the exact same time.
Exhausting.
It really is. So if you tell an A1 learner, well, the word sometimes is this nebulous gray area that shifts depending on context and tone of voice.
They're just going to shut down.
You will break their working memory. They will totally freeze. By assigning hard, immutable mathematics, the 150 and 0 to these fluid concepts, the lesson provides the student with a concrete anchor.
Oh, I see. It's like a mental shortcut.
Exactly. It creates a temporary but completely stable mental model. 0 is the absolute void. 100 is the absolute totality. 50 is the precise, unmoving center. It's basically a necessary fiction, a pedagogical scaffolding that allows them to climb up without falling off.
A necessary fiction. Wow.
Yeah.
That fundamentally changes how I view this kind of basic instruction. You have to give them training wheels made of solid steel before you let them navigate the bumpy terrain of an actual conversation.
Precisely.
And they desperately need those solid mathematical anchors because the lesson immediately forces them to use them to solve a mechanical problem. It introduces a structural law that it calls the position rule.
Ah, yes. This is where the true friction of learning English syntax becomes apparent. The position rule governs the architecture of the sentence.
And the rule is stated with absolute unyielding authority. It says the frequency word must be placed before the main verb.
Right.
And the lesson is completely explicit about this. It doesn't just show the right way to do it. It deliberately showcases the failure state. It presents this glaring wrong answer marked with a massive red X, which says, I clean always.
Which is such a common mistake for beginners.
It really is.
Yeah.
And then it immediately juxtaposes that failure with the correct answer, marked with a green check mark. And it utilizes heavy capitalization to really hammer the visual placement home. I always clean.
Nice.
Yeah, and it follows this up with, I sometimes exercise, and I never eat junk food.
I want you, the listener, to take a moment right now and deeply analyze your own internal monologue. Think about how you naturally conceptualize an action in your mind's eye.
Okay, I'm thinking.
When you think about a habit, what is the primary image? You picture the action first. The verb is the core architecture of the thought. You envision the physical act of cleaning a room or the physical exertion of exercising.
Yeah, the action is definitely the star of the show in my head.
Exactly. The frequency, the metric of how often you perform that action is secondary data. It's an add-on, a modifier to the primary event.
It's just secondary information. Like if I'm describing my day, the core event is the run. The fact that I do it every day is just extra flavor.
Precisely. And many languages around the world actually structure their syntax to reflect that natural cognitive priority. They place the action front and center and tag the frequency adverb onto the very end of the sentence.
Which honestly makes a lot more sense intuitively.
It does. But English syntax is demanding. It forces the speaker to declare the parameter before they reveal the event. You have to establish the frequency before you introduce the action.
It reminds me of setting the dials on an oven. You wouldn't just throw a raw chicken into a cold oven and then try to figure out the temperature later.
That would be a disaster.
Right. You have to set the dial, you have to establish the environmental parameter before you introduce the food. English requires you to set the frequency dial to 100, 50, or 0 before you're even allowed to introduce the verb.
That is a phenomenal analogy. Or think about it like writing a line of computer code. In many programming languages, you have to declare the type of variable you are creating before you assign a value to it.
Oh yeah, you have to build the container before you fill it.
Exactly. English syntax operates on a similar logic. I am establishing a 50% parameter, and the action filling that parameter is exercise.
But for a beginner whose native language operates in reverse, That must feel like walking backward while blindfolded.
Oh, it requires a massive rewiring of their real-time thought process. The mental gymnastics are intense. The A1 learner has to hold the action, the verb, in their working memory, suppress the urge to say it immediately, reach into their vocabulary bank to retrieve the correct frequency adverb, physically speak the adverb, and only then release the verb.
That is so much processing power.
It is, and this is exactly why those hard mathematical anchors from the first segment are so crucial. If sometimes it's just the vague feeling, retrieving it takes too much cognitive bandwidth. But if sometimes is simply the number 50, retrieving it is instant, leaving enough processing power to successfully execute the position rule.
Okay, so the lesson has successfully built the scaffolding. We have the rigid math, the 150-0, and we have the rigid mechanics, the position rule.
Yes.
But here is the problem with scaffolding. It's incredibly boring to look at. Math and structural mechanics do not inspire passion, and honestly, they don't stick in long-term human memory on their own. So how does an educator transition a student from these cold, abstract concepts to vibrant, memorable fluency?
Well, you transition from mathematics to mythology, you create a narrative.
Yes, and this brings us to the absolute genius of this document. It shifts gears entirely. It moves into a section explicitly titled Storytime.
I love story time.
The pedagogical pivot here is just staggering. We completely abandon the clinical dissection of grammar and step directly into a psychological drama. We go from memorize this formula to watch this man destroy his own reputation.
And the execution of that drama relies heavily on the specific vocabulary we just established.
Let's set the stage for this narrative. The document actually provides specific performance instructions for the instructor. It insists that the story must be read at an agonizingly slow pace, ensuring every single grammatical structure lands with maximum impact.
Which is great for retention.
Definitely. It introduces two characters, a woman named Anna and a man named Lukas. And the psychological profile of Lukas is established immediately through this brilliant stage direction. The instructor is told that when voicing Lukas, they must sound like an angel at the beginning, very innocent.
Anytime a character in a didactic story is instructed to sound innocent and like an angel, the audience immediately understands the subtext. It is a universal storytelling trope.
Oh, 100%.
True innocence does not need to announce itself. If someone is projecting angelic perfection, they are overcompensating for a massive hidden flaw.
Exactly. The narrative tension is established before the characters even exchange a single word. The scenario is that Anna is visiting Lukas at his home, and Lukas is clearly deeply invested in impressing her.
He's putting on a show.
He is desperately trying to construct this persona of the ultimate flawless human being. The lesson plan actually refers to him trying to be a perfect man. He wants Anna to believe that his life is an unbroken string of excellent, highly disciplined choices.
And pay close attention to the specific tools he uses to construct this flawless persona. He doesn't just use flattering adjectives. He weaponizes the grammar rule the student just learned.
He absolutely weaponizes the extremes. He builds his entire defense mechanism out of 100% and 0%.
Yep.
Looking directly at the text, his dialogue is a masterclass in hubris.
Let's hear it.
He tells Anna, "I am very healthy. I always exercise in the morning, and I never eat junk food." And he doesn't stop there. He pushes his luck even further, gesturing around his apartment and claiming, "And look at my bedroom, I always clean my room."
This is where the mathematical anchors we discussed earlier serve a dual purpose. They aren't just for memory retrieval anymore. They are now the foundation of the dramatic irony.
Right.
By having Lukas speak exclusively in absolute 100% and 0% increments, the author of the lesson is painting a massive target on his back. As a reader, or as a student listening to this, you instinctively know that human beings do not operate in absolute metrics.
It's just not possible.
Right. No one is a 100% or a 0%.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If we pull this out of the textbook and drop it into the real world, Lukas is an incredibly recognizable archetype today.
Oh, absolutely.
He is the quintessential modern social media influencer. He's the guy on your feed who curates every single post to project this immaculate existence. He always wakes up at 4:30 a.m. to plunge into an ice bath, and he never consumes anything other than raw sunlight and organic almonds.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
It is. It's that desperate human desire to edit out our flaws and present a sanitized, impenetrable version of ourselves to society.
And the fundamental rule of dramatic storytelling, whether it's a Greek tragedy or an A1 English lesson, is that hubris must be punished. Pride comes before the fall.
Oh, and the fall is coming.
By structuring his entire identity around the words always and never, Lukas has made his persona incredibly fragile. If you claim to be an 80% kind of guy, people forgive your mistakes.
Sure, you're human.
But if you claim to be a 100% guy, a single microscopic error destroys your entire foundation. The narrative tension for the student is no longer about remembering the grammar rule. The tension is entirely about waiting for the 100% facade to shatter.
And the shattering is spectacular. Anna is clearly not buying the angelic routine. She essentially becomes an auditor of his grammar. He starts investigating his physical space to see if reality actually matches his syntax.
She is testing the factual truth of his grammatical assertions.
Exactly. She walks into his supposedly pristine bedroom, the one he claims he always cleans.
Yeah.
She crouches down, looks under the bed, and spots a single dirty sock. Just one piece of contradictory evidence.
The first crack in the armor.
Yes. She confronts him. Lukas, what is this? And Lukas's reaction here is a brilliant piece of behavioral observation. The text notes that he coughs nervously, and in that moment of panic, he has to completely abandon his 100% vocabulary.
He realizes he's trapped.
He desperately reaches for the escape hatch of the 50% adverb. He stammers out, I sometimes forget one sock.
It is the universal sound of backpedaling. The 50% sometimes becomes his shield. It is a deeply authentic human reaction.
We've all been there.
When an absolute lie is confronted with undeniable physical evidence, we rarely surrender completely. We don't jump from 100% straight down to 0. We retreat to the middle ground.
I'm not a total liar. I'm just a 50% liar.
Right. We offer a partial truth to soften the blow. I didn't lie. I just occasionally misplace things.
But the partial truth is a flimsy shield, and Anna is relentless. The single sock was just the appetizer. She moves out of the bedroom and approaches a closed closet door. She grabs the handle, she pulls it open, and the document actually abandons standard formatting entirely here to emphasize the sheer chaos of the moment.
The buildup is amazing.
It uses fully capitalized exclamation-pointed sound effects. Shh, bang, bang. The instructor notes specify that Anna should react with genuine vocal shock.
The visual of the hidden reality bursting forth to destroy the curated persona. What exactly falls out of the closet?
10 empty pizza boxes. They cascade out of the closet and crash directly onto Anna's shoes. It is the ultimate, undeniable, catastrophic destruction of the perfect man. The 100% facade hasn't just cracked. It's been obliterated by an avalanche of greasy cardboard.
From a comedic standpoint, the physical comedy of the boxes hitting her shoes is excellent. But what elevates the scene to absolute genius is Lukas's psychological response in the aftermath of the avalanche.
Yes. His face turns completely red. He is standing over a mountain of evidence that proves he is a liar. And his defense, his final desperate attempt to save his dignity, is a line I will never ever forget. He looks at Anna, he looks at the pizza boxes, and he says, well, pizza is a vegetable.
That line is a profound distillation of the human ego in crisis. Why does that specific excuse resonate so deeply?
Because it's just so pathetic.
Well, yes, but also because it exposes the sheer absurdity of our internal defense mechanisms. When we are caught red-handed, when the physical evidence of our failure is literally resting on someone else's shoes, our brains undergo a massive spike in cognitive dissonance.
We panic.
We do. The discomfort of admitting we are hypocrites is so psychologically painful that our minds will attempt to bend reality itself to avoid it.
He cannot deny that the pizza boxes exist. They are right there. And he cannot deny the rigid grammatical structure of his previous claim that he never eats junk food. So his only remaining path of logic is to attempt to redefine the physical universe. If he can successfully reclassify a pepperoni pizza as a garden vegetable, then his 0% adverb remains technically intact. It's the ultimate cope.
It is the ultimate cope, and it is universally recognizable. I want the listener to reflect on their own moments of cognitive dissonance. Think about the ridiculous mental gymnastics we all perform to justify breaking our own rules.
Oh, I have so many.
I didn't actually break my diet by eating this cake because I walked up a flight of stairs today, so the calories cancel out. Or I'm not actually procrastinating on my work. I'm just letting the ideas marinate while I watch 4 hours of television.
Exactly. We all have our own version of pizza's vegetable.
We absolutely do. And Anna sees right through it. She doesn't argue nutrition with him. She crosses her arms. She laughs at the sheer audacity of the excuse, and she points at the mess. And then She delivers the final judgment, utilizing the exact grammar rule the lesson is designed to teach.
It's so good.
She says, Lucas, you never clean your room, and you always eat pizza.
If we connect this to the bigger picture and look at the architecture of this entire narrative, you realize that this is not just a funny anecdote. It is a highly engineered, deeply sophisticated mnemonic device.
A mnemonic device disguised as a sitcom episode.
Exactly. Break down the mechanics of how that works in the learner's brain for a second.
Okay, so human memory does not prioritize dry, abstract rules. If you hand someone a piece of paper that says adverb goes before verb, their brain will discard that information within hours because it lacks emotional resonance.
That's just noise.
Right. Our brains evolved to remember narratives, to remember social dynamics, to remember surprise and humor. By creating this specific scenario, the lesson takes the abstract structural concepts of never and always and welds them to a highly visual, emotionally charged climax.
It creates a permanent mental association.
Precisely. Long after the student has finished this lesson, they might struggle to recall the clinical definition of the position rule. But they will never, ever forget the image of a grown man turning bright red as an avalanche of pizza boxes buries a woman's feet while he desperately tries to claim that cheese and dough are a vegetable.
It's unforgettable.
And because that visual is permanently etched into their memory, they intuitively remember the grammatical structure Anna uses to destroy his argument. You never clean, you always eat pizza. The syntax is smuggled into their long-term memory inside a Trojan horse of sheer comedy.
That is the magic of great teaching. You don't even realize you're doing the heavy lifting of memorizing syntax because your brain is too busy laughing at the absurdity of the situation. You're completely disarmed.
But a masterful educator doesn't just assume the Trojan horse worked. They verify. They test the structural integrity of the newly acquired knowledge. Which brings us to the final phase of the lesson plan.
Yes, the transition from narrative reception to active production. We move into the fourth segment of the document, an interactive finale labeled the lie detector game. And the pedagogical mechanics of this game are fascinating because it requires the characters to essentially break the fourth wall.
It shifts the dynamic entirely. The characters step out of the dramatic narrative and transform into interactive avatars for the student's learning process.
Anna suddenly adopts the persona of the instructor, and Lukas is forced into the role of the student. The rules of the game are rapid fire. Anna calls out a specific mathematical percentage, and Lukas must instantly translate that percentage into a full English sentence, utilizing the correct frequency adverb and strictly adhering to the position rule.
It is a high-speed mechanical drill, but because it is framed as a playful interrogation between two established characters, it doesn't feel like a punishment. It feels like banter.
Let's track the progression of the drill. Round 1 and Round 2 are designed to reinforce the baseline mechanics. In Round 1, Anna challenges him. How do you say, I do it 100% of the time. I always clean. Lukas snaps back, perfectly executing the rule. Put it before the action. I always clean.
Notice what he does there. He doesn't just provide the correct answer. He explicitly verbalizes the mechanical rule before he gives the answer. Put it before the action.
Reinforcing the rule out loud.
Exactly. By forcing the student to read that out loud, the lesson is strengthening the neural pathway. The physical act of speaking the rule solidifies the mental architecture.
Then we hit Round 2. Anna drops the percentage. I do it 50% of the time. I sometimes exercise. Lukas immediately mirrors the structure.
Yeah.
I sometimes exercise. So far, they're just running basic scales.
Right, just getting warmed up.
But Round 3 is where the lesson plan delivers what might be its most brilliant pedagogical insight. It introduces a direct conflict between reality and syntax.
This specific exchange is arguably the most philosophically sophisticated moment I have ever seen in an A1 level curriculum.
Anna throws the 0% parameter at him. I never eat pizza. Huh. Now, based on the story we just witnessed, we know this is factually impossible for Lukas. His response is incredibly meta. He yells, that is a lie. But the grammar is, I never eat pizza.
I want to spend some time unpacking the depth of that single line because it solves one of the most debilitating psychological blocks a language learner faces.
Oh, really?
In this one brief exchange, the lesson actively teaches the student to decouple grammatical truth from factual truth.
That is a really dense concept. Decoupling grammatical truth from factual truth. Walk me through exactly how that functions in the mind of a beginner.
Okay, so when an adult is learning a new language, they are usually hyper-focused on authentic communication. They want to express their true selves. Because of this, they often feel a subconscious obligation to ensure that every sentence they practice is factually accurate to their real life.
That makes sense.
But it's a trap. If an exercise asks a beginner to translate the phrase, "I have a dog," but the beginner is actually allergic to dogs and owns a cat, they will often freeze.
Because it feels like a lie.
Yes. Their brain registers the sentence as a lie, and they experience a microdose of cognitive dissonance. They don't want to speak a falsehood, so they stumble trying to figure out how to say cat instead, and the entire grammatical lesson is completely derailed.
That is so true. I remember trying to learn Spanish, and a prompt asked me to say, I love playing soccer. I hate soccer. I literally spent 5 minutes internally panicking trying to look up the word for basketball instead of just practicing the basic verb structure. I was letting my personal biography get in the way of the mechanics.
Exactly. You are prioritizing semantic accuracy over syntactic practice.
Yep.
What Lukas does in round 3 is grant the student explicit permission to lie.
That is a lie, but the grammar is.
Right. He points out the absurdity of the sentence, but then he executes the sentence perfectly anyway. He is demonstrating that you can construct a flawless, structurally sound English sentence, a sentence that is 100% grammatically true, even if the content of that sentence is a total fabrication in the real world.
It's like practicing scales on a piano. When you play a C major scale, you aren't trying to express a deep emotional truth. You aren't playing a real song. You are just training your fingers to understand the spatial relationship between the keys.
That's a great way to put it.
Lukas is telling the student, we aren't testifying under oath here. We're just playing linguistic scales. Build the sentence just to see how the blocks fit together.
That separation is incredibly liberating for a learner. It removes the burden of biography from the learning process. It tells them that the language is a toy they are allowed to play with, not a rigid contract they have to sign. To embed that level of metalinguistic awareness into an exercise designed for absolute beginners is nothing short of masterful.
It totally frees the mind to focus entirely on the machinery of the language. But of course, because this lesson is built on a narrative arc, the drill cannot end on a fabrication. We need narrative closure. We arrive at round 4, which the document literally labels the climax.
The final resolution of the psychological drama.
Anna drops the role of the teacher and becomes the interrogator again. She demands the unvarnished reality. She asks, and what is the truth about Lukas? And Lukas finally surrenders. He drops the angelic act, he abandons the facade of the perfect man, and he confesses to the universe, I am sorry, I always eat pizza.
It is a perfect structural loop. He returns to the extreme 100% adverb, the always, but this time he anchors it to the messy, undeniable truth. The tension of the entire lesson is resolved, both narratively and grammatically.
It really makes you evaluate the nature of learning, doesn't it? If you are listening to this right now, I want you to think about the most complex things you have successfully learned in your life, the concepts that really stuck with you.
Yeah, think about what made them stick.
How often did they involve an element of play? How often did a funny story, a ridiculous analogy, or just a moment of playful teasing serve as the glue that held the data in your brain? We often think of education as this incredibly serious, austere endeavor, but emotion, humor, and narrative are the most powerful adhesive forces in human cognition.
We are not hard drives. We do not store raw data in a vacuum. We are fundamentally narrative creatures. We make sense of the world through stories.
We really do.
If you want a human being to retain abstract data, you must wrap that data in a human experience. Lesson 65 understands that an adult learner's brain is just begging for a story to attach these strange new rules to.
So what does this all mean as we pull these threads together? Let's just marvel at the sheer efficiency of what we've unpacked today. This single A1 level document takes a terrified, overwhelmed beginner and carefully guides them through a profound cognitive journey.
It's really quite a ride.
It starts by offering them the comfort of absolute mathematics, the 100, the 50, the 0. It uses those numbers to construct a rigid, unyielding architectural law, the position rule. And then it breathes life into that cold architecture through a laugh-out-loud drama about a man whose desperate attempt to hide his junk food exposes the deepest truths about how we all lie to ourselves.
It is a masterpiece of moving from the abstract to the mechanical to the deeply, hilariously human.
It proves that the mechanics of language cannot be separated from the psychology of the people speaking it.
Absolutely.
And the practical takeaway here stretches far beyond the boundaries of English grammar. Whether you are attempting to master a foreign language, trying to understand a complex new field of study, or, quite frankly, just trying to be honest with yourself about the state of your own bedroom,
Huh.
beware the absolute metrics.
Yes, beware the extremes.
Be highly suspicious of the 100% and the zeros. Anyone who loudly proclaims that they always make the optimal choice or never succumb to a bad habit usually has a dark closet full of greasy pizza boxes just waiting to crash down onto your shoes.
Perfection is a grammatical construct, a syntactic trick. It is not a human reality, and analyzing these rules actually raises a deeply provocative question that I want to leave you with today.
Oh, I'm intrigued. What is it?
Well, we have spent an hour dissecting how the English language explicitly forces the speaker to quantify the frequency of their action before they are allowed to state what the action actually is. I always check my email. I never take breaks.
Right.
If the very architecture of our language demands that we prioritize the metric over the meaning that we track the frequency of the habit before we even acknowledge the habit itself, does that rule fundamentally shape our worldview?
Oh, wow.
Does speaking English subtly wire our brains to build a culture that is relentlessly obsessed with productivity, data tracking, and the constant optimization of our behaviors?
That is a staggering thought to chew on. Does the architecture of the language shape the culture, or did the culture build the language to reflect its obsessions? Something fascinating for you to mull over as you navigate the routines of your own day. Thank you so much for joining us for this incredibly deep dive into the mechanics of language and the absurdities of the human ego. Keep digging deeper into the hidden structures of the everyday things around you, whether it's the syntax of the words you speak or the messy reality of the habits you try to hide. We will catch you next time.